What if the finale's biggest secret is hiding in plain sight? A 4-digit number printed on a train ticket. Stay with me, because that tiny clue could unlock everything about Henry and Julia's escape, Ellen's wedding day, and the meaning of something borrowed. It's been a quiet week without a new Blood of My Blood episode, but the story hasn't paused. Last week's preview cracked the door open, and now there's a fresh trailer with scenes we haven't seen before, like Ellen in full wedding attire, veiled from head to toe. I'm going to walk through what the episode 10 preview shows, layer in the new footage, connect the dots with some careful theory crafting, and point out the hints that confirm what many of us suspected: Ellen and Brian are not waiting around. They're running, and the path they take might already be mapped by the music. First, the episode 10 preview throws us forward with Julia and Henry in the modern day, right before they accidentally time travel together. They choose Inessie as their escape route and buy train tickets. And here's the part I missed at first. The ticket numbers read 1714. That is the exact year they land in. It's a small detail, but it feels like the writers are winking at us. If a prop is whispering the destination, what else is it telling us about intention versus accident? Was their crossing really an accident, or is the story nudging them all along? Keep that question in your pocket, because it makes everything else sharper. There's another emotional spark in those Julia and Henry moments. We finally glimpse Claire as a child with Uncle Lamb. We know and love the adult version from the larger saga. But the 5-year-old Claire adds a new layer. What kind of person is Uncle Lamb, really? What does little Claire see, learn, absorb? Those answers matter, because Episode 9 and Episode 10 are written by Diana Gabaldon, which usually means the dialogue carries extra weight. When she writes conversations, they aren't filler. They spin out consequences. Expect lines that seem simple now to echo later. Now, about the danger stalking Brian. In the earlier preview, a group of men tail him, and the question is obvious. Who sent them? One theory points to Colum. When he promised Ellen he wouldn't harm Brian, he slipped in that slippery phrase, "From this point onwards." If he'd already sent killers on their way, he could promise anything afterward. It's the kind of technical truth that sounds honorable but isn't. Another theory accuses Simon Fraser, fueled by the mess from Episode 9, but patricide feels like a step too far for that time and place. There's a third possibility: Uncle Grant, furious at the scandal that Ellen's love would bring. Yet there's no proof he knows the full story. And then there's Dougal. He already knows his sister's heart is with Brian. He's a fighter. If he wanted blood, he'd likely handle it himself rather than send others. Each suspect has a motive, but the lines don't quite lock into place. That uncertainty keeps the tension tight around every corner Brian turns. Speaking of tension, one of the new trailer's cleanest turns is Murtagh and Brian making peace. Murtagh recognizes the kind of love that doesn't come around twice. He sees what Brian feels for Ellen, and he chooses to act. That choice matters. It changes the odds. With Murtagh at his side, Brian is no longer a man trying to outrun a shadow. He's a man with a plan, and someone to watch his back when the blades come out. This alliance points to a fight with those men tailing Brian and to a mad dash to stop a wedding that never should have been scheduled, which brings us to Malcolm Grant. In one shot, he is furious. In another, an elder relative spits out a threat that debts will be paid in blood. If that line comes after Ellen vanishes, it tells us the timeline. The fury hits once the plan is already in motion. The household realizes too late that the bride they tried to cage won't stand still. If the chase begins after the veils and vows are set, then every rider on the road is racing either to recapture Ellen or to buy time for her escape. Let's jump back to Henry and Julia for a moment, because their strand knots into the same rope. They choose a meeting point in front of Castle Leathers. Julia will bring little William. Henry gets there. Julia gets there. But then Julia shouts, "Help me!" That's not just panic. It sounds like a sprung trap. The preview also shows Simon Fraser and his man Bollock hunting her. How did they know the plan? The thread runs back to the brothel worker, someone who either fell for Henry or clung to him in an unhealthy way. She was present when Henry and Julia whispered about their rendezvous. If she carries the tale to Simon or his men, the lovers walk straight into a net. But even if Henry and Julia slip the net, even if they run to the stones, there's a bigger question. Can they actually travel without gemstones? Not everyone can cross without them, and not every crossing works the same way. Do they stumble through by luck? Do they fail and need to try again? The preview keeps that answer hidden. The uncertainty is the point. It holds us on the edge between triumph and loss. There's a wilder theory floating around that Henry and Julia will time travel at the end of episode 10 and somehow land straight into the events of season 8 of the larger series. That feels too neat and too far-fetched. Narrative doors usually open one room at a time. The most satisfying version is often simpler. They do or don't cross, and the cost of either choice ripples into the finale without collapsing the architecture of another season. Now, the new trailer adds a shot that changes how we read Ellen's wedding day. She's in full bridal attire, her veil completely hiding her face. Suspicious, isn't it? A fully shrouded bride invites a classic trick, the false bride. Imagine someone like Mrs. Fitz under the veil, buying precious minutes while the real bride slips out the back. Why does a scene like that work so well? Because it explains how Brian could plausibly get Ellen out while every eye is on the ceremony. Disguise buys time. Time buys distance. Distance makes pursuit difficult. If the show leans into that play, then the veiled figure at the altar isn't Ellen at all. It's misdirection. And misdirection is exactly what you need when your enemy counts heads. The conversation between Brian and Murtaugh in the trailer adds more fuel. They're not trading gossip. They're setting a course. Either Brian stops the ceremony before the vows, or he steals the bride a heartbeat before the promise. Both options are reckless. Both say the same thing. Love is a verb. He's doing, not waiting. About that title, episode 10 is called Something Borrowed. The old rhyme, something borrowed, something blue, dates to the 19th century, so it may not sit in the same era as our story. That makes the title feel metaphorical rather than literal. Perhaps borrowed refers to time borrowed from fate, or to a bride borrowed from the wrong altar. If the day is supposed to belong to Malcolm Grant but is briefly borrowed by Brian, then the title names the theft that saves a life. And the strongest confirmation that Ellen and Brian truly run? The soundtrack. The penultimate track is called The Bothy, and it stretches about 7 minutes. A bothy is a small, unlocked shelter in the remote Scottish hills, open to anyone in need. That word isn't casual. It's a location, a promise, and a mood. You can hear the scene just from the title. Wind at the door, breath slowed at last, two people catching each other in the dark. If they reach that refuge, then the plan worked long enough for love to breathe. The length of the track suggests a full sequence, not a passing shot. Shelter matters because it buys the story a second act after the escape. It says they made it this far. Now what? Let's circle back and tie the threads. Julia and Henry's train tickets spell 1714, so their escape was always pointing toward that year. The writers are signaling that destiny is not random. It's nudging. The brothel worker is likely the leak that sets Simon Fraser and Bullock on Julia's path. The help me at the meeting point isn't just fear. It's the alarm bell of a trap well laid. Whether they crash through the stones in time depends on gemstones, Will, and perhaps the same strange current that put 1714 on a ticket stub. On the other track, Brian is hunted by men whose patron still feels most plausibly like Colum, because of that slippery promise that only covers the future, not the sins already in motion. Uncle Grant's fury and Malcolm's rage bloom after the escape begins, not before, which places Brian and Ellen ahead of the net. Murtaugh's decision to help is the hinge that turns survival into possibility. Meanwhile, the veiled bride is a silent riddle. If the face is hidden, who's really at the altar? A stand-in would explain the impossible, how a bride already at the vows could vanish and leave her pursuers arguing with a ghost. Something borrowed may not be about lace and ribbons at all. It may be about stolen minutes, a borrowed bride, or the cheating of fate by a love determined to live. And the bothy on the soundtrack reads like an answer key slipped under the door. If a bothy waits in the hills, then Brian and Ellen are not planning a dramatic declaration in front of the congregation. They're planning a disappearance, The hills are their chapel, the wind their witness. There's still room for surprise, of course. We don't know if Henry and Julia managed to cross without gemstones. We don't know if the false bride trick actually plays out, or if the show sprints straight for open confrontation. We don't know whether the killers at Brian's heels answer to Colum, to an angry kin, or to another hand altogether. That's the thrill of this setup. Each thread feels taut, and any one of them could snap the moment someone hesitates. But look again at that first clue. The ticket stamped 1714. The story is telling us that details matter. When a number on a piece of paper tells the truth before the characters know it themselves, you start reading the world like a code. You look for the borrowed minutes, the hidden faces, the ways love borrows courage from the future and spends it now. If Ellen does run, if Brian does fight, if Murtaugh stands with him, then the wedding doesn't end with a kiss. It ends with a vanishing act. If Julia cries out at Castle Leathers and still wriggles free, then the stones may yet answer. And if the bothy swells for 7 long minutes, then somewhere in the dark a door closes, a bolt slides into place, and 2 people breathe in the same quiet at last. So yes, hidden in a train ticket, buried in a title whispered by a song, Episode 10 is already speaking. The finale isn't just about who catches whom, it's about who reads the signs in time. And right now, every sign points to the same truth. Love is running, and the hills are waiting.